You wake up, not because an alarm told you to, not because a number on a screen reached a specific digit. You wake up because the light changed, because your body finished what it needed to do while you slept, because something inside you simply decided it was time. There was no clock to check. There was no clock anywhere on Earth. For roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors lived entirely without the thing you probably check within minutes of opening your eyes every single morning. No hours, no minutes, no seconds. And yet somehow they managed to hunt at the right moments, gather food before it's spoiled, raise children, build shelters, and coordinate complex group activities across dozens of people. How does a society function without ever being able to say, let's meet at 3 p.m.? The answer is that ancient humans were not actually timeless. They were extraordinarily precise. They simply measured time using an entirely different set of tools, ones built directly into the natural world rather than mechanical or digital ones. The most fundamental clock available to every human who has ever lived is the sun. Anthropologists studying contemporary and historical hunter-gatherer societies have documented an intricate, almost universal system of dividing the day by the sun's position. Not 9 a.m. or 2 p.m., but concepts like when the sun is directly overhead or when shadows have grown as long as a person is tall. Among the Hadza people of Tanzania, studied extensively by anthropologists including Frank Marlowe, daily activities were and still are organized around these solar landmarks rather than numerical time. A specific shadow length meant it was time to start moving toward water. A particular angle of light through the trees meant the hunting window for certain animals was closing. This was not an approximation people tolerated because they had nothing better. It was often remarkably accurate. Marlowe's fieldwork among the Hadza found that despite having no mechanical timekeeping devices whatsoever, daily routines showed a level of temporal consistency that closely tracked solar cycles, sometimes more reliably than modern humans manage with alarm clocks and calendar apps, because their internal biological clocks were never disrupted by artificial light, shift work, or screens. Beyond the sun, the night sky offered an entirely separate and equally sophisticated timekeeping system. The moon's roughly 29.5-day cycle from full to full provided a longer unit of time, something close to what we now call a month, a word that linguists believe derives directly from moon in multiple ancient language families. Anthropological and archaeological evidence suggests that tracking lunar phases was one of humanity's earliest forms of long-term timekeeping. The Lubombo bone, discovered in a cave in Swaziland and dated to roughly 43,000 years ago, contains a series of deliberate notches that some archaeologists, including Alexander Marshak, have interpreted as a lunar tally, possibly used by ancient humans to track menstrual or lunar cycles. While this interpretation remains debated among researchers, it points to a deep human drive to externalize and record cycles of time long before any concept of clocks existed. There is a third clock most people never think about, one that exists not in the sky, but in the body itself. Modern chronobiology, the scientific study of biological timing, has confirmed that the human body contains what researchers call a circadian rhythm, an internal clock built into nearly every cell, regulated by a small cluster of neurons in the brain known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This internal clock does not require sunlight to function at all, only to stay calibrated. Studies of people placed in caves or bunkers with no natural light or clocks, including the famous 1972 experiment by French geologist Michel Siffre, who spent months underground entirely alone, found that human sleep-wake cycles persist on their own, drifting slightly without external light but never disappearing. Your ancestors carried this same internal clock. It told them when to feel hungry, when to feel alert, when to feel sleepy, all without a single external reference point, because the reference point was never outside them in the first place. It was running inside their bodies the entire time, exactly as it still runs inside yours. Let's reconstruct what a single day might actually have felt like, fully immersed in this system, with no numbers attached to any of it. Picture yourself in a band of around 30 people somewhere in East Africa, 50,000 years ago. You wake naturally as gray light begins replacing darkness at the edge of the sky. A transition your body has responded to every single day of your life and the lives of every ancestor before you. There is no debate about whether it is too early. Your circadian rhythm, the internal biological clock that exists in every human being regardless of culture or era, has already begun preparing your body for wakefulness hours earlier, releasing cortisol gradually as dawn approaches. The band begins moving with the light, children start playing as the air warms, adults discuss the day's tasks, hunting, gathering, tool repair, based not on a schedule, but on direct observation of conditions, animal behavior at this hour, plant ripeness, weather patterns building on the horizon. As the sun climbs and the heat intensifies, around what we would call midday, activity naturally slows. Many hunter-gatherer societies documented by researchers including Richard Lee show a clear pattern of reduced midday activity correlating directly with peak heat, essentially an ancient, universal version of a siesta, dictated entirely by solar position and temperature, rather than any clock telling people to rest. As the sun begins descending and shadows lengthen, energy returns. This is frequently when serious hunting expeditions occurred, time to avoid the worst heat while still allowing enough daylight to track and process an animal. The exact moment to turn back toward camp was not measured in minutes remaining, but estimated by remaining shadow length and distance from home, a skill requiring intense environmental literacy that modern humans, dependent on phones and watches, have almost entirely lost. This kind of literacy extended into specific, learned techniques. Many documented hunter-gatherer cultures used a method anthropologists call the handspan technique, holding a hand at arm's length to measure how many hand widths of sky remain between the sun and the horizon, with each hand width corresponding to a rough estimate of remaining daylight, something close to 15 minutes per finger width, depending on the season and latitude. A hunter far from camp could glance at the sky, measure the gap with an outstretched hand, and know almost exactly how much usable light remained to make it home safely before nightfall introduced predators and navigational difficulty. This was not folklore. It was a precise, teachable, repeatable measurement system, passed from elder to child the same way you might teach a child to read a digital clock today. As true dusk arrives and temperatures drop, the band gathers. This is the time anthropologists like Polly Wiesner have documented as the universal window for storytelling, social bonding, and rest. Again triggered not by a specific hour, but by the changing quality and color of the light itself, and the changing behavior of nocturnal versus diurnal animals signaling the day's transition. Here is the counterintuitive twist that surprises most people. We tend to assume that clocks made human life more organized, more efficient, more in control. In many ways they did, but they also disconnected us from an extraordinarily sophisticated biological and environmental timekeeping system that operated for hundreds of thousands of years with remarkable reliability. Modern sleep researchers, including those who have studied isolated populations living without artificial light or clocks, such as a famous study of the Hadza and other groups conducted by chronobiologist Samuel Yetish, found that without modern lighting and scheduling, human sleep and wake cycles naturally synchronize tightly with sunset and sunrise, producing more consistent and arguably healthier sleep patterns than the average modern adult experiences, despite, or perhaps because of, the complete absence of any clock. This does not mean ancient life had no concept of duration or planning. It means duration was measured relationally rather than numerically. A task took as long as it takes to walk to the river and back. A pregnancy lasted through several moons. A child became an adult after this many dry seasons. Time was embedded directly in lived, observable experience, rather than abstracted into a universal, context-free number that exists the same way whether you are happy, exhausted, bored, or fully absorbed in something meaningful. Think about the last time you checked a clock purely out of anxious habit, not because you needed to know anything specific, just because the number itself felt like it demanded acknowledgement. That compulsive relationship with measured time is entirely a modern invention. Your ancestors never once felt that particular kind of pressure because the very concept did not exist for them to feel pressured by. You wake up. Not because an alarm told you to. Not because a number on a screen reached a specific digit. The sun is the only clock you have ever truly needed. And for nearly the entirety of human existence, it was more than enough. It was more